All right. I'm going to go ahead and do a video tutorial for lesson two. I've had a few questions about this, and so I thought it'd be best to kind of walk you guys through it in a video. I have already opened up the first two tutorials here. This is L2-01. And I guess before we get started here, let me take a couple steps back. If I open up my email, a couple people had questions about this too, downloading and opening a zip file correctly. So I'm here at the email that I sent out. Here's the zip file. I'm going to go ahead and click download. And on a Mac, it's going to just pop up right here on the bottom and begin downloading. On a Windows computer, I believe it's in the upper right-hand corner. But it's fairly similar. Once it's done downloading, I'm going to go ahead and open it up. On a Mac, it automatically expands or unzips the files so that you can access them. On a Windows, you're going to have to click on the zip file itself, right-click, and then as a part of that menu there, unzip will be one of the options, and you have to unzip it in order to have full access to those files. So I hope that clears things up for those of you that were struggling with that. So again, I've downloaded it. I have navigated to lesson 2, PDF tutorials, and opened L2-01 and L2-02 on my screen. I'm on a smaller computer tonight, so I'm not going to have half of the frame be the PDF and half of the frame be Fusion. Instead, I'm going to kind of have to hop between the two. So I hope I'm not too jumpy with it. All right, so in this tutorial, we are going to learn how to create a sketch. Sketches are kind of the basis for how you model. So you make two-dimensional sketches, and once those are fully dimensioned and fully constrained, so the geometry, therefore the geometry is fully defined, you'll finish the sketch and then you can extrude it using a variety of tools to create the third dimension. So we're going to create a sketch, apply a sketch dimension, apply constraints to it as well, and the geometry we'll be focusing on is a center point rectangle. Of course, there's circles, and there's different ways to make circles, squares, rectangles, and then of course you can define your own more complex geometries as well. At any rate, open a new untitled document. All right, I'm going to go to my Fusion interface here, and as soon as you log in, an untitled document, it says this at the top, is already open for you. So typically when you're just getting started, it'll already be in that environment. All right, make sure the solid tab is active in the toolbar, and then click Create Sketch. All right, so the solid tab is this here, okay? There's also a surface tab, a sheet metal tab, and a tools tab. And each of these tabs have different functions underneath them, okay? If you're doing sheet metal parts, you're gonna build using these tools, or at least it'll help. You don't have to, but these tools are specifically made for designing with sheet metal. Under the Tools tab, you have things like inspecting. One really useful tool for inspecting is a measurement, or being able to measure various edges, surface areas, so on and so forth. So say you download a PDF or a Fusion file from somebody else, and you want to get a specific dimension off of it. This is the tool that you would use. At any rate, let's get back to the tutorial. I'm in the Solid tab, and we're going to create a sketch. Now, where are we going to create the sketch? It asks us to select the XZ plane. And it also says to choose the top plane. So this is, I think, where a few people got confused. Because if we go back here, let me get an orthogonal view to make it a little easier to see. All right. On the cube, it says front, and then we have XZ. So XZ is actually, in this case, the front view. And I believe that's the default when you open Fusion 360. That's how I like to orient my all my files, is exactly as it's shown here. But you can actually define which is the front of your part, and that could be the XY plane, that could be the YX plane, or in our case, the XZ plane. And as a matter of fact, you can really make any plane you want in between those as well, your front of your cube. But that gets I guess complex and muddy and hard to follow. So I highly recommend sticking with the ZX plane as your front and kind of building off of that. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to ignore the fact that it said top plane in the tutorial. We're going to keep it we're going to keep the XZ as the front plane, and we're going to select the XZ plane. Notice when I toggle over it in the center here, this little guy highlights on the side. So I'm going to toggle over the XZ. You can see that it's highlighted on the left-hand side, and we're going to select that. Once we select it, it spits us into sketch mode, and we know that because yet another toolbar comes up, and we have a ton of other functions here that we can use specific to sketching. All right, after the sketch plane is selected, notice the sketch tab is added to the toolbar. We just mentioned that, and explore the various tools that are available in this. I'm not going to go through this exhaustively, and our sketch palette actually shows up as well. But you can go in, let's say you have a sharp edge on like a rectangle. You can modify that under this, well, modified tab, and you can add a radius by simply clicking on this function and then clicking on the corner that you want to apply the radius to. And then you define, obviously, the radius itself. You can trim, you can create offset lines to kind of follow or map or contour an existing shape. So let's say you're making a vase. Well, you're going to define the inside of the vase, and then you can use offset to add a wall thickness to the vase itself. A lot of other tools. I recommend you take a second to explore that. But to continue on here, we're going to create a line, and it's going to have us click anywhere a couple of times such that we make a polygon with 4 sides. Simple enough. So if I come over here, I'm going to click line. You can get to line either by highlighting it here, or you can see this little letter here, the L, that's showing you the hotkey or the shortcut for pulling up a line in sketch mode. So I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click L on my keyboard, and you see it's already highlighted it, and I'm ready to draw a line. So you can see it toggles to vertical, and that little blue icon next to the 90 degrees there, that is a vertical constraint. And that means that that line will always be vertical no matter what I do, no matter what changes I make to the 4-sided object, that will be rigid as a vertical segment. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it that way. Oh, no, I'll apply that later just for the sake of going through it. And you see when you want to close an object, it'll actually snap to the point. Otherwise, it'll be an open object. We don't want that. So snap to the point. Okay. And we know it's closed because it highlighted the region in here like a light blue. I'm going to click escape to exit out of the line command. And let's just go back to our tutorial, make sure I'm doing this all right. So it said here, some constraints might have been automatically added based on what it snapped to as you were drawing the lines. So in this case, that's a horizontal constraint. Again, meaning that no matter what changes you make to this shape, that line segment is going to be stuck at horizontal. You can go ahead and click on that. So let's do that. Let's make a horizontal constraint here. You can see it right there. I'm going to exit that so that I'm not on constraint anymore. I can actually click on that constraint and delete it. I just hit the delete button on my keyboard. And you can see now, well, there's some other constraints here that aren't allowing me to change the angle of this, but it's more free form. See that? That's free form. Horizontal or vertical constraint on, oh, well, it's not doing it. No, it's because I've highlighted this point. At any rate, horizontal, back there. Click on one of the shape's corners and notice that the additional constraints appear. In this instance, a coincidental constraint indicates that these two lines are coincident with one another at that selected point. Coincident just means that they come together and meet. So if I click on any one of these corners because we know they're all connected, they're all going to have that coincident constraint. Select two of the shape sides by clicking one side, holding the control key and selecting the second side. Then once we do that, I'm going to read two steps at once. In the sketch tabs constraint group, click constraints perpendicular to add a perpendicular constraint between the two selected lines. Okay. So this actually already has a perpendicular constraint here, but we're going to go ahead and do that. So this and control, I don't normally use a Mac. Oh my gosh. Well, this is just a Mac being a Mac. Oh my gosh. Maybe it's command on a Mac. There it is. So if you're a Mac user, it's not control, it's command to select multiple objects at once. Okay, so if we toggle over these, we can do a variety of different constraints, and we want to do the perpendicular one. That snaps this line 90 degrees to this line, and we're going to do the same to that as well, I'm guessing. And this is going to over constrain it. Oh, error, see, over constrained. So because we have constraints here, here, and here, this, by the laws of geometry, has to be 90 degrees, and therefore we can't constrain that corner. It's already fully constrained. So great, we have ourselves a rectangle. I'm still in the perpendicular constraint function. You can see that underneath my arrow key and highlight it up here. And to get out of any function, you just simply press escape. Okay. Okay, this brings up a great point in the tutorial. It had us apply a 90-degree angle constraint to just one edge, and then a parallel constraint between this and this edge. So I didn't do that. They did, but the point is there's a variety of ways to fully constrain a sketch using dimensions and or these various constraints up here. And all will get you to the same end result. It just depends on how you want to approach it. So we have a fully constrained rectangle. I'm happy with that. And we're not going to use the parallel lines. I guess we could. I'll delete one of these, which means that, right, if we're looking at this line, the degree of freedom is that this line can be not parallel to this line. And so that's what we're concerned with. So I'm going to click Command, Parallel, Boom. Great. Moving right along. Select one of the shape's corners and drag it around the canvas. Note that the shape sides remain perpendicular and parallel according to the constraints that you've placed. So just for certainty, all right, this remains 90 degrees from this. Likewise here, and then these two lines stay parallel, and this line remains horizontal, fully constrained. Okay. Click Finish Sketch. Create a new sketch. Okay, again, choosing the same plane. Awesome. Finish sketch, great. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and hide this existing sketch so that I can make another one kind of in its place. And then it won't be confusing as to, which one I'm looking at. So I can hide it by coming over here on the left-hand side. I don't actually know the technical term for this thing. I'll have to look it up. But underneath sketches, the sketch folder, there's a little eyeball icon, and I'm going to click on that to turn it off. I can turn it back on by clicking on it again, but we want it off. All right, new sketch, XZ plane. Again, that's the front plane for us, not the top plane. And we're going to use a center rectangle. All right, and once we click on center rectangle, click once on the sketch's origin, meaning 0, 0, where, what is that? Z equals 0 and X equals 0 to begin the rectangle, and then drag the shape outward, then entering 100 millimeters into both of the rectangle, or both of the dimension axes. Let's see. Create. Where am I going here? Rectangle, center rectangle, up and out, 100. You can see it was automatically highlighted, so I just had to type in 100, and then I'm going to click Tab, okay, to get to the next one. You can use Tab to toggle between the two, and I'm just going to do 100 by 100, and I'll zoom out a little bit. Great. So it's already, like they're saying, it's already dimensioned it for you because you went ahead and input it. They didn't input a dimension here, not yet anyway. They went back using the dimension tool to dimension this length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redimension this segment here. Okay. So in order to do that, there's a couple of things I can do. I can just double click on this dimension and resize it like that. Or let's go back to where we were. I'm going to delete this. Let's say I hadn't put in a dimension to begin with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here. This is sketch dimension, right? This is how you define your geometry. It's another way of fully constraining an object. So I can either click on this, or it doesn't show it here. It doesn't show the hotkey for dimension. Oh, there it does. Sketch dimension D. So you can, at anywhere in the interface, click the letter D, and I'm automatically in sketch dimension. Okay. 75. I'm going to show one more thing real quick, just for this hell of it. Let's put that back at 100. Let's delete it. Okay, let's go back in our dimension tool. All right. You saw that I clicked on this line segment and defined its length as 75 millimeters. There's one other way to define this length here, and it's not by clicking this line. It's instead by clicking this line and this line. All right, you're still defining the same length, but you're highlighting different segments. And depending on how you're making a part, if it's more complex, sometimes it's nice to define off of the same edge. And by that, I mean, maybe you define everything by the left edge or by the bottom edge or something like that. So you don't necessarily need to define lengths solely on one edge. Instead, you can do distances between one point and another. All right, 75. exit that function. Finish sketch. Okay. We'll have 2 sketches by the end of this. We're going to click the save button and we're going to name it Simple Cube. And that's the end of this tutorial. So finish sketch. All right. Really helpful tip here. This is another hotkey. If you hold down Shift, this is only works if you have a mouse. If you're using like a keypad, I don't, or sorry, a laptop mouse pad. I don't know what the protocol is, but if you have, excuse me, if you have a mouse, hold down Shift and click the scroll button down, hold it down, okay, and that's going to allow you to orbit to any view that you want. It makes it way easier than coming up to your cube and orbiting from that, or coming down here and clicking orbit, which are 2 valid ways to do it. But holding down Shift and the scroll button is certainly faster and I think easier. So that's our sketch. We're going to save it as Simple Cube. Make sure the location is right, especially if you have several other folders. And I don't even remember. Let's see. Let's not put it into getting started because I've got a bunch of other stuff in here that might make it confusing. So, well, at any rate, let's see. There we go. I'm just going to save it into Intro to 3D Modeling. And it's almost off my screen. Save. All right, we're done with the first part of lesson 2.